I always thought that ghosts were a figment of our imagination, something that existed only in stories and movies. That was until I moved into my new apartment. At first, everything seemed normal, but after a few weeks, strange things started happening. I would hear footsteps in the hallway outside my door, but when I went to check, no one was there. Objects would move on their own, and doors would slam shut when there was no wind. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw a figure standing in the corner of my room. It was transparent and seemed to be made of mist. I couldn't believe my eyes. I froze, unable to move or even scream. The figure began to move towards me, and I felt a cold breeze on my face. I could feel its presence getting stronger, and my heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the figure disappeared, and everything went quiet. I was left alone in the dark, trembling with fear. I didn't sleep at all that night, and I spent the rest of the week trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But the following night, the figure returned. It was closer this time, and I could see that it was a woman. She seemed to be reaching out to me, and I could feel her cold breath on my face. I was too scared to move or scream, and I just lay there, frozen in terror. After that night, the figure appeared every night. She would come closer and closer until I could almost touch her. I tried to ignore her, but I couldn't. I was terrified, and I knew I had to do something. I spoke to my landlord, and he told me that the apartment building was built on an old cemetery. He said that many people had reported seeing ghosts in the building, and that some had even moved out because they couldn't handle the paranormal activity. I knew I had to get out of there. I packed my bags and left the apartment that night. As I was leaving, I saw the figure in the hallway. She was smiling, and I could feel her presence even as I walked out of the building. I will never forget my experience in that apartment. It taught me that ghosts are real and that sometimes there's no escaping the horrors of the supernatural. When I was about 8 years old, I remember this time my brother and I were waiting for our bus to pick us up from school, and it was still dark outside. It was a pretty small town, so our bus had to drive pretty far to come to get us. I remember it was pretty cold outside, so we would set our backpacks on the ground and sit on them and bundle up in our coats while we waited for the bus to come. We both saw this figure walking down the road toward us, and we thought it was one of the older kids coming to the bus stop. When he got close to us, we noticed it was a man and he was carrying a shovel. He came up to us and asked if we saw someone walk by there not too long ago. We both said no, and he walked off in the other direction. I didn't think much of it as a kid because I didn't make any connections, but I think about it now as an adult and think, holy shit, that guy was carrying a shovel looking for some guy, and the sun hadn't even risen yet. It was strange for sure. A lot of strange stuff happened where I used to live that I often think about it. I am 16 and this happened 4 nights ago. Not too long ago, I decided to go on a walk. I live in a rural area where there's no one out. There are very few little streetlights, and you would need a flashlight to see. I was about halfway around the block when I came to the first and only streetlight that is on at this route. There was a shadow under the little light that this streetlight produces. It was still and didn't move. To be honest, it kinda creeped me out. The thing about the road I walk on is it's barely wide enough to fit a car. So, if I walked past this light, I would be close enough for this person to run up to me without giving me time to run. I stood there for a second and texted my dad. At first he was like, just walk past them, it should be fine, and then he got mad that I was even out so late in the middle of winter. I walked past them as my dad said, but the rest of the walk, that person would be right behind me at the same distance, never closer or farther. When I got to my driveway, I ran up, slipped on ice, and cut myself. This effectively woke up my grandpa by slamming the door. I haven't gone on a walk since. I have 2 stories to tell. Both take place in a German forest that is very popular with hikers like me. First one, it was around 1 year ago. This trip was in the middle of the week. I drove to the parking lot and it was empty. On the weekend, you normally find 20 to 40 cars over there, but this time I was alone. I went my normal route I've hiked already more than 10 times. After a few kilometers, the route went along an open field. But before I was able to see the field, screams resounded through the forest. Blood-curdling screams, inhuman screams. I am an experienced hiker. I have seen and heard a lot of deer, foxes, wild boars, and rabbits. But this was new to me. It was so loud and unnormal, straight out of a horror game. At this point, the hike was over for me. I ran back to my car. The second story happened a week ago. Also a hiking story. Do you know this feeling when you think someone is watching you, but you turn around and see nothing? On one hiking route, I used to go a few times per year. I've got this feeling every time I'm in a specific section. It's 3 kilometers of pure horror. In this section, things are changing regularly, not because of humans, but because of nature. A lot of trees are falling on the path. I often see deer crossing my way, and more wild boar tracks are showing up. So every time I'm here, I'm speeding up. But it's worth it. A part of the trail you can see after this section is breathtaking. It's a dense valley like in a grim fairy tale. So on my last hike, I also had to cross the horror section. From the first meter, I've got the chills again and speed up. Until the moment a duking deer crossed my way. But it didn't just cross my way, it stopped, looked at me, and blocked my way. Like, hey human, stop, go where you came from and never come back. But I didn't want to go back. I managed to get 80% off the horror section and knew it will be only a few more meters until the cool parts of the hike are starting. So I went directly through the forest to get around the deer, and it worked. But when I entered the next section, I couldn't calm down. I've still got this feeling someone or something is following me. I regularly looked behind me, always hoping to see nothing. Slowly, I was calming down after a few more kilometers, thinking about my next rest area. But then my biggest nightmare came true. Over the last few weeks, it rains a lot in my region, and the little stream beside my route went to a big river that flooded the path I had to use. The temperatures were around freezing, so it would be a horrible idea to go through the river. Since I was in a dense valley, I had only one way I could go back. There are no other routes. To make it even worse, it was winter and I only had 2 more hours until sunset. But I needed more than 3 hours to come to this place. So the solution was to run out of this place, not caring about any animal running in the dense forest, birds, or breaking sticks. I was only thinking about my car, my keys, and the moment I could use them to unlock my car. I will never visit this part of the forest ever again. We have this forest close to our home where we would tell each other that a weird old grandma lived. There was a cabin deep in the forest, or so our older peers would tell us. They knew this because we had a rite of passage where at 11 the boys were to walk up to the house and knock on the door. It was my turn. We walked towards the house and arrived at about 11:30 p.m. My friend stood by a rusty old gate just before the house to allow me to walk up to the house alone. I gathered courage and knocked faintly. Nothing happened. I knocked again, a bit louder this time. Still nothing. Feeling victorious, I turned to head back to my friends. When I arrived at the gate, they were not there. The place is covered in dried leaves, so it would be pretty easy to hear any footsteps, but I don't recall hearing any. A grumpy old voice called from behind me, "Who is it?" I ran back as fast as my feet could carry me. When I arrived at the edge of the forest, I found my friends sitting there, waiting for me. "What the hell, you guys? You really freaked me out." They all did not know what I was talking about. "We were here waiting for you the whole time. We didn't think you would arrive early just to go in by yourself."